Well, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to this webinar that's a strengthening of democratic mechanisms for the LGBTQ plus population in Latin America. And this seminar has as the objective to promote and discuss the democratic engagement and ensure greater LGBTQ inclusion in Latin America, Argentina, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. We have a presence of a reference of the LGBTQ plus in Argentina and Bolivia, and they will be participating by means of questions and telling us about access to democracy, access to the public sphere. We have Elam Castillo, who's coordinator of the network of lesbian bisexual women of Bolivia. And we have also Andrea Rivers, president of AFDA and co-chair of the ERC SDG group in collaboration with the UK. And we also have a special guest from the UK that could not join today, but this web seminar is being recorded in both languages, in Spanish and English, so that it will be posted on our YouTube channel and it will be shared with those who were not able to attend today. We will get started, and I have a couple of questions to make to you. We have a limited time, so I apologize ahead of time because I will be setting the time. So let's try to make the most of it. So we start with the first question, and then you decide who would like to start with the answer. So what are the main challenges faced by the LGBTQ plus community in Latin America in terms of democratic participation and access to justice? So who would like to take the floor and start? Elam, do you want to start? Okay, I'll start. So thank you for this exchange and for offering this space so that we can share the different pertinent experiences that make us grow and in our community. So regarding the mention, the question, I would like to focus on my territory, although I don't think that it would be different from others. That is what we're going through. And in Bolivia, well, we have democracy as of 2019. It's tumbling and pending from a thread in regarding vulnerable populations. So for us and the LGBTI, it's not a good moment to say that we're part of democracy. And I wanted to tell you that in Bolivia, other than having democratic spaces, we had different referendums, and we have assemblies, and we have different ways to participate in democracy in Bolivia. But currently, one of these was taken, that is in the department of Santa Cruz, that is the initiatives for citizens legislative initiatives with the participation of the population. This is a tool that we have in Bolivia, democratic tool, and this tool, was used last year by people who defend life of the family. So last year on December 14, 2023, unfortunately, through this law that was approved, that is the law of the integral protection to life of families, this law, I just want to summarize it, but it has the purpose of protecting lives and families as a natural course, something between a man and a woman, and that's it. So this law has fixed policies and has fixed sanctions and that are against diverse families and against the LGBTQ plus population. So within this democratic process that took place last year, when we found out uh, as an institution, as a movement of LGBTQ plus at Santa Cruz, we decided to file a lawsuit and to be part of this democratic process. This was accepted, but we never had a legal response. That is, if they were going to take into account our position within this democratic process. So we had a very violent movement and response and discriminatory movement. We were able to enter the legislative hearing, but as I mentioned, this was not a safe space. It was not a space where people, lesbian people, queer people, or gay people could raise their voices. This was not a safe space. There was a assembly member and they did not give us the floor. And this was a space in which there were lots of Bibles and rosaries and there were nuns and priests and they had all the seats were full of them. We were only just 5 or 6, so it was a public space paid by the taxes of Bolivian people. So this should be an open space for the Bolivian society, but we had police officers and security officers. They were just watching whether we had an unwanted behavior and we were to be removed. However, the only intervention that we were able to have that was short and brief, we were able to report that this law, this was unconstitutional. But unfortunately, the right wing was able to gather the votes to pass the law. They did not take into account the unconstitutional treaties or the international treaties that were vulnerating human rights of populations. So this was a process in which we were there were lots of organizations and collective organizations that defend the right to safe and legal abortion and LGBTQ plus population, but we were not able to achieve any results and we were not able to be heard. So there was the ones who had a voice. There was a religious representative that his name is Gabriel. I don't remember the last name, and this was a representative of the group of Safe Family, as it's called, this organization, and they protect their family. So he had the floor to speak and to explain the fundamentals of the law. And he said that it was impossible for us to be taken into account because the decision of founding a family is only possible between a man and a woman, because if not, we would be giving this decision to someone that is impaired, who is blind or who is deaf. So therefore, um, he's considering the LGBTQ population as a disabled population. So we could not reason, and his recommendation was for us to take and to undergo psychological treatment because we cannot be entitled to found families or protect a life or have children. So this was really a very important moment for us in this struggle, and we are analyzing how to go through this legal aspect and how to file a formal claim collectively. But this is a process that took place in Bolivia a while ago, and as you may notice, the democratic process is still pending from our, we still need our participation. And I also wanted to share that when we talk about justice and when we talk about accessing justice, taking into account this example, if we cannot be part of this democratic tool or instrument that guarantees the compliance of international treaties, you may understand that when we want to access the prosecutor's office or different agencies protecting childhood, for instance, or police officers, there's this vacuum as to how to respond to these specialized cases regarding LGBTQ, because we're not heterosexual population. So therefore, the tools and the attention or the service for us is not the same. And there's a direct violence towards the LGBTQ population. There's a previous lack of sensitivity that has been thought of and planned. It's not the same. So therefore, many people who are lawyers, they may understand that to have this safe of the crimes, well, they need to be specialized. We have always thought that there should be a specific department in the justice that is specialized in crimes against the LGBTQ population, as it is with gender-based crimes, because the resolutions are completely different and the treatment of cases are absolutely different. So there's an accompaniment of training and education that public or private officers should undergo, those who have to support these kinds of crimes against our community. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Elam, thank you for everything that you have just shared. Andre, do you want me to repeat the question or can you start answering? I remember. Thank you. Thank you, Elam. I agree. I fully agree with Elam. I think that what is going on right now, unfortunately, is something that takes place in each of our territories, especially in Latin America and in the Caribbean, with characteristics of each of the countries based on their own idiosyncrasy, but with many common patterns where we find first the lack of empowerment of the LGBTQA plus population, because they greatly don't know the rights for the participation in the democratic mechanisms as a tool of advocacy and as a participation and empowerment of the rights. And there's a lot of bias in those who handle the agenda of open government and those who handle the democratic and transparency mechanisms and access to public information mechanisms, because they do not invite in an institutionalized way the organizations or the civil society organizations of the LGBTQA plus. So therefore, we have a situation in which we have multiple factors or barriers that make people and the civil society and the LGBTQA plus community has a very little participation in democratic processes. And as the companion said, we are part of them because as citizens, we pay our taxes and the law applies for us equally. So suddenly, when we want to put our citizens into practice, we come across a lot of barriers, and these barriers have to are also accompanied with a lot of setbacks that we have in our region. These are coordinated setbacks and planned setbacks, and this is important to take into account because each of these setbacks that takes place, as the case of Santa Cruz and as is the case of Argentina, where we are resisting really strong justification of a brutal adjustment in which public policies for LGBTQA plus people are confused, because with we are celebrating 40 years of democracy in our country, and democracy should be strengthened. However, we find a reduction of the access to the state and the public sector that needs to guarantee the access to these policies. And we find a discourse, a speech that is really very dangerous, and it's a hatred a speech. And this not only generates more discrimination or more violence, but also more vulnerability. But we also discover that there are people, those who abide by this hatred speech, and they uh, make our states relative, as if they were just temperamental speeches, that of course they are allowed these kind of behaviors for men, but not for any of the panelists who are here at the meeting, because if we were to call a name or to curse, we would be expelled. But the president in Argentina has celebrated 100 years, sorry, no, 100 days in office, but they seem 100 years. But this 100 days of insults, of cursing and aggressiveness has become a natural thing, and aggressiveness and aggression online is appalling. There's a violation of human rights that are naturalized, and the violence against the LGBTQA plus community and peoples online is incredibly important. And it seems that all the investment in our collective is seen as an expenditure. So therefore, we no longer are human beings, and we are just spending, and we are no longer people who have access to rights. And this is something really very dangerous, where maybe in Argentina, the president has a lot of empathy towards dogs and canine, and not for the people, where he asked people to queue in a line to see whether they are hungry. And I want to stress this, because we are getting used to this, and these are terrible images. They are very strong images. I want to close with this part saying that I grew up under the dictatorship in Argentina. That is, I was a very young person. When I was a teenager, Argentina recovered democracy. And in the first years of democracy in Argentina, there was a situation that the police in many organizations, they had dictatorial practices. And I uh, remember many of these situations that I experienced when I was really young as a teenager, but under democracy. And this is not what people should endure. Democracy should not have any authoritarian mechanisms where other people should be eliminated, or where the political influences are used to eliminate other person. And this is something that has happened historically, and we are in a very complex moment in which, due to ethnic reasons or due to gender identities, there's an systematic and coordinated elimination of these populations, among which is the LGBTQA plus community. And unfortunately, uh, while we see our people suffering hunger and violence that is systematic and coordinated, we have to hear that so many things are going on in the world, as if it seems like we should say, okay, well, we can have um, food on our plate, but I really think that if there's anyone who keeps on thinking in this way and this becomes a mainstream thought, I invite that person to uh, rethink and to reflect on this, because they will be accomplices of the violence and the discrimination that is being perpetrated against our people. So I invite those who are in positions of power and responsibility as a president of Argentina, that they should make the democratic mechanisms more agile for the LGBTQA plus community without undergoing any kind of violence and insecurity. And I would like to denounce that recently in Argentina, I am talking about access to justice. After 40 years, after the democracy was reinstated, and after all the work that we've done regarding the 30,000 people who were missing in Argentina, it is only now that there is a ruling where there's a recognition of the historic uh, redressing of people of the LGBTQA plus community that were tortured and kidnapped during the dictatorship. And this really makes it evidence how justice is longer for our community. And it is not minor that there was an attack close to March the 24th that was reported by a companion that was that suffered a violence in her house, and there were two perpetrators waiting for her. I will not go into details, but you can imagine all kinds of violence that she had to undergo, and she works in the former ISMA uh, investigating, doing research on the LGBTQA plus people that went missing during the dictatorship. And this is very important because this also accounts for what is going on. And also there's many public policies that were closed and these are considered as expenditure. And I really cannot conceive this, that we're talking about human rights and that human rights are considered as an expenditure. And to close, and this is something that I find it very dangerous. When Elam, colleague, was talking, the thing of winning an election does not mean that you have a license to kill, and you cannot use the democratic processes to not comply with the international treaties that states have signed, and to alter the democratic processes and mechanisms as they should be, with the plurality and participations that are guaranteed in international treaties and in the corresponding constitutions. Winning an election does not mean that you have a license to kill, because this is something that takes place in Bolivia as well as Argentina and in other countries. And it seems that, well, we won the elections because we're going to fight against something terrible, call it uh, drug dealers, narco trafficking, drug trafficking, inflation, or whatever. And in the middle, we can do anything because we can justify because we won the elections by a majority. But we are not living in a jungle. Um, there are lions playing a game and they just want to devour people, but there are international treaties, there are laws, there are human rights. We need to put the focus on human beings, of course, on animals as well, but above all on human beings. Okay, so in this first stage, we talked about the challenges of the democratic participation. Now we're going to go through a second stage, and we're going to talk about public policies for inclusion. So from your point of view, what public policies are crucial to strengthen LGBTQ plus inclusion in Latin America and the region? How can civil society, governments, and international partners collaborate in this participation and to implement these policies effectively? This will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. We believe that we can enrich by exchanging all our experiences. So now I'll give the floor to Elam to answer the question. Thank you, Jesus. So it's good that you gave this information. So thinking about this question, what sounds familiar is how could we organize ourselves to implement these policies effectively? I think that we should work from a civil society organizations in a collective way and nationally all the LGBTQ plus communities, because these fundamentalist policies, they are looking to erase the resistance of the LGBTQ plus populations and also to punish them in a punitive way. And I think that this is already happening. As our colleague said, there's many things that we overlooked, and our activism was focused on strategies of visibilities and policies and strategies of becoming visible and to just getting together in feminism and working in different schools and on education. But I think that we sort of like left aside these democratic processes and political processes and how these political processes need to be worked little by little and how they have to be there in civil societies and from regulations and politicians. So this is still a work that I think that we need to do collectively within our own spaces of bisexuals and lesbians and gays, where we should work on these processes, how we can advance on this and respond to these fundamentalisms of this possible change and have a better life next to God, or these false promises that they will give us what corresponds. And it's not truth. This is a political persecution in certain countries. So I think that we need to work on these political educations and political processes that each country has within the context of violence against the LGBTQI population. For us, it's important to work if in Bolivia. Maybe it's not the same in Argentina and other countries, but it's important to talk about statistics. In our country, the national institutions of our country works specifically with statistics. And for us, it's important to take into account these variables, gender identities in the variables, in census, in surveys, and in administrative records that have to do with the statistics office, so as to generate these public policies for the LGBTQI population. For us, it's important. Unfortunately, in Bolivia, we already had a census after 2012, and I'm sorry to say that we were not taken into account in this census. So we did not fulfill this statistic need for the country and for us as a LGBTQI plus population. It's important to be able to generate corresponding policies and to counteract this hatred speech that exists in Bolivia. I also believe it's important to develop legal regulations and that have to do with uh, uh, professions that like goes against this hatred speech or these religious speeches or the hatred against the LGBTQI population. I think that that should be sanctioned. So we should be able to develop these regulations, embracing human rights that are as are in the constitution, and also the respect, as Andrea said, of the international treaties. And that would be important. And it would be great that we could state in all the region, I don't know if this is possible, this is a dream, a vision that I have, but I think it's important to have justice, a specific unit of justice that is specialized against the crimes against the LGBTQI plus population, as is the case with violence against women, in order to eradicate the violence against our community. Because in many countries, there are no constitutional rulings or sentences that establish a case law as to how these hate crime was and how it should be dealt with from a legal point of view, so that we can build on statistic information in the judiciary. Very well. Now it's your turn, Andrea. I will time you. Okay, I will go fast, being timed. I fully agree with Elam. I believe that it is essential for government, I mean, as a recommendation for the government, I think it's essential to institutionalize the participation of LGBTQA plus civil society organization. I will give an example of what happens in Argentina. An open government in the parliamentary sector, we receive very few invitations. So behind each sector that needs to guarantee access to public information in each state, behind each different areas of open government or any other participation mechanism, I don't know, the access to public information, for example, but in the different mechanisms that exist, there needs to be a person that starts to institutionalize the part of the population that is missing, so that really everything that is defined can really have a democratic participation in an exercise of our rights. Just to be more specific, I made a small study of data sets in the states of Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador, looking for the websites of open government websites. What were the data sets of LGBTQA plus? I looked for it as LGBT diversity. The one that had the most was Argentina, under the title of diversity, where we could, up until the day I did this study, we could find information regarding the transvestite trans work quota, and we could have statistics regarding legislation in Argentina. Now, regarding the rest of the countries, there was nothing. Nothing was to be found, and no data set. And when there's no data set, what does it mean? That when a lesbian, a bisexual, or any other of our identities calls a hotline to report violence, many things could happen. One is that um, they should maybe hide the truth regarding the gender identity to be able to have access to this public policy. Therefore, the, uh, they are made invisible due to violence. And the other thing is that they are made invisible by the state. So therefore, there's a violation, an institutional violence that should be understood as a violation of human rights, because it's not possible that we do not appear on these data sets, and it should be of concern, because if we are not there, it means that public policies are not reaching the LGBTQA plus policies, the most basic ones. And in that sense, I believe that governments need to uh, really work to comply the international duties, and also internally, because there should be no important gap internationally and nationally. So I believe that it is very important for governments to start doing this. And on the other hand, the movement, that is, our movement should gain more awareness in where are the spaces where we need to be, or to have more presence or have more strength. And this is something that is something that we should tell our donors, because what happens is that then we do not have the funds to be able to sustain our presence. It's essential to have the funding. Sometimes I am asked, so why do you need the funds? Well, I could give a huge list. One is for this, to be able to participate in democratic spaces, to, as a civil society organization, to be able to ask, for example, everyone, every person who had to suffer a violence situation ever since the different organizations as INADI were closed, where did they go? What are the amount of hormones that are being distributed? This is not information on the state. It is something that the state should give us. This is our human right. We are entitled to know this. When a couple of years ago, the city of Buenos Aires made an urban design as to how the city of Buenos Aires should look like, they would invite different organizations. So from after we were only able to attend twice. Why? Because we did not have the resources to attend every meeting. However, all the meetings were attended by, I don't know, I have a cat. I don't know if you can hear my cat in the background, but I was a bit distracted, sorry. So in that sense, when they designed the city, there were different associations that attended. They were anti-right associations, and they would discuss with me in terms of what the toilets should be. And we had very different visions and perspectives, because I imagined a city where we we did not have to endure violence, sexual abuse, or rapes. And these people would tell me, no, the toilet is a place where women need to go to be safeguarded from all kind of violence, but no LGBT person could go there. So what I mean to say with this is that people from these organizations had the resources to go to every meeting as if it was a mass, and just to say things like and they were able to say lots of things. If we were able, if we just said 1% of what they said, we would have been expelled. So our colleague here is also a lawyer, and we have to be highly qualified, where all these other people go to different meetings, attend different meetings, and where they do not comply with any requirement other than being a serial hater. So I think that we need to be on equal footage, and there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of biases, and this is where they become noticeable. It's not possible that we need to have 2 or 3 university degrees to be able to participate from these assemblies or meetings where these other people just see the light and they just go in. It's terrible. So it's not only a question of how they participate, but the amount of funds that they have to participate. So therefore, this is really makes it very difficult for us. And I see that Elam also has information, something about a group. Yeah, well, very interesting what you both shared, Elam and Andrea. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for sharing all this information with us. We have a last uh, question that has to do with actions for the future in democratic mechanisms. Now, looking for the future, what are the specific actions that key stakeholders should undertake to guarantee the participation of LGBTQ plus and a civil society in Latin America? That is from your own perspectives. Elan, let's keep the same order as before. Thank you. Well, this is a key question. It's a hot question, right? And a complicated question also. I'm thinking of the word biased and this perspective towards the future for key stakeholders. We know that in different territories there are different resistance, and in Bolivia, well, Bolivia, it's an indigenous country, and we come from the Maras and the Guaranis, and as indigenous people. So we need to work, and we need to know and be aware that this intersectionality and resistance exists when we talk about gender, data, economy. This will allow us to work on these participation processes, not only to lesbian and bisexual people, but also to those who have this intersectionality. Many of us come from communities, indigenous communities, so as to avoid this sexual violence that people suffer, and these are not reported, and we do not have this statistic information for LGBTQ and indigenous communities. So it's important to take into account this intersectionality to be able to verify the patriarchal capitalist repression that also exists, but the biphobic or transphobic violence that does not allow for a democratic advance, but a setback. First, you're a woman, then you are a lesbian woman, and then you are an indigenous woman, then your economic situation changes, and there's a lot of intersectionalities that do not allow to to build in a collective way. So these key stakeholders at a certain point, these are people who have different privileges, and these privileges are not questioned. These are overlooked privileges, and through these they want to remove democratic mechanisms or tools without these veil of these possible intersectionality of our population. So we have these colonialism perspective that stops us from advancing. So I think that it's important to stop this fundamentalistic advance in the region. So this is why we need to have this political education and what it meant, I don't know, the colonies in Bolivia, and what this white privilege means that wants to repress again once again, this indigenous resistance where we have trans people, lesbian women, LGBTQ plus. So I think it's important for us to take this into account and to bring it to the key sectors so as to get out of this blind perspective that tries to make these repressions and violence invisible. I believe this is important. And also the communication, as the colleague says, the communication of any political party in the state of a region, communication is important because they will not be able to cover or hide the political incapacity over our resistance, and they will not be able to try to conceal or to hide because we only discovered after 6 months what this law that was passed was about, but they will not be able to erase or repress our resistance, um, the resistance regarding sex identities or gender identities. It would have been impossible to say it better. I know we're about to reach our time, so I want to be fast and brief in this time. At an international level, we are having, well, the summit of the future is taking place where the pact for the future is being rewritten among the countries. And this is also related to SDGs. And we have a huge responsibility in that sense because we are within the ERC, and a colleague also is part of a group of ERC and SDGs. And with this urgency that states that work with us and also those who do not work with us, but those states where we can exert influence, that is, states that want to lead and states that want an agenda that this time complies with the objectives. And for that, there's many negotiations. We are living a key, critical moment. And for that, it's essential that these leading states take into account several variables. One is the one that our colleague mentioned, because as long as we have extractivism in our regions and the concentration of unequal power and oppression based on an inequality as the one that is being generated, well, it is very different to think of a different future different from the present that we have today. So first, the structural basis, and we have to understand that LGBTQA plus people are in these SDGs, and many of these SDGs have a more unequal impact on us because we are part of our community. Because as Elam said, this adds to a woman if the woman is perceives herself as a woman, then she could be a lesbian, bisexual, or indigenous, and she could also have a disability. There's many intersectionalities, or she could be a woman, or they can be a woman from rural areas in our territories. And this has a differentiated impact when we are from the LGBTQA+. So this needs to be understood by those who are writing this pact or summit of the future, because these are the tools that will help us in the territories. It's important for people to take this into account, because when we speak about international treaties, when we speak about international law, it's essential, fundamental that we are included there. So I would close by urging the countries where we work together, those who are part of these groups, and also of other advocacy groups in international fora, as the colleague does as well, because then it will have a repercussion over our territory. So I urge you to be at the level of what Secretary General asks. So thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea and Elam, for sharing all this knowledge and for giving all this information on this seminar regarding the strengthening of democratic mechanisms for the LGBTQI plus inclusion in Latin America. So this will be recorded and then posted online on YouTube, where we will be leaving other written information and access to these seminars. So thank you very much. And we will see each other again in other meetings or seminars. Thank you very much. Thank you, Elam. Thank you. Thank you to see you around.